All right, welcome back to the Fall into Tech podcast, ladies and gentlemen, hosted by my friend Michael Rodriguez and myself, Jameel Matten. We're two Marines turned techies, and on this podcast, we chat with fellow veterans about their journey from military to the tech industry, as well as other tech professionals who can help you with your tech career.
Yeah, tune in weekly for guest interviews where we discuss specific tech roles, career paths, and different tips for succeeding in tech. And today we have Keith Pickering on. Thank you, Keith, for being here. Keith is a former Marine turned tech enterprise account executive. And I actually met Keith back when we were both students at the basic school in Quantico, which is where Marine lieutenants go to get initial training before they hit the fleet. And then we actually met back when we were both instructors there before we kind of got out of the Marine Corps. So really appreciate you having you on, Keith. And we like to start with a fun little segment of, hey, tell us a fun fact about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jameel, Mike, thanks for having me on this. I'm excited to be part of this and give back however I can. Yeah, Mike, it's funny, full circle back at the basic school there. Fun fact, I think something always interesting that I can talk about myself is my time stationed in Hawaii. For any military station in Hawaii, I feel like they either love it or hate it. Hate the island feel or absolutely love it. I loved it personally. I will say when I first got there, a couple of the new lieutenants, or I guess lieutenants that had been there, decided to take me out surfing. It took me out into surf that was not exactly easy for a first timer. I kind of just got beat up by the waves for like a couple hours and didn't try surfing again for another year after that. And when I did, I absolutely loved it. I miss Hawaii. It was certainly a great time for sure.
Actually, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like everyone tries to surf for some reason. Like I bought a surfboard. I still have it for no reason when I was living down in Surf City by Camp Lejeune, and I could barely swim. So I don't know why I thought that was a good idea.
Well, Keith, so tell us a little bit about, what years you were in, and super curious about, why did you choose the Marines versus any other branch?
Yeah, for sure. So I went to college, Duquesne University, and then commissioned in 2013, and I was in until 2021. Why the Marines? I think a big part of it was just because it seemed like the most challenging. I think that was my drive to it. Like a lot of Marines, it seemed like the most difficult branch, like the hardest thing to do. So I think that's why I ended up there, for better or worse.
Right. And could you tell us a little bit about what your military occupation and some of the roles and units you were part of?
Yeah, for sure. So I was an infantry officer. I immediately went to Hawaii and was a platoon commander. And then I was a weapons platoon commander, and then moved up to the battalion level and was a battalion assistant operations officer, and did a couple of deployments and rotations out to East Asia there. And then after that, came back to the basic school, and I was an instructor there, warfighting instructor in the bullpen with Mike here for a bit, and then went out and I was a platoon commander for the warrant officers going through that school, and then finished my time just before leaving the military as the operations officer of the martial arts center there in Quantico.
Very cool. So you must have picked up black belt if you're somewhat of an instructor out there. Is that right?
Yeah, I was. I think I was a brown belt, and I think I made it clear, like when I started operations officer there, that I'm probably going to remain a brown belt for the remainder of my military career. Those guys were really a great crew to work with, true professionals and good fighters, to say the least.
Nice. And thinking back during your time in service, what would you say were the best parts and worst parts of being in?
Yeah, I think the best part, and it's funny how much I see it now, being in the role that I'm at, but I really loved the fast paced aspect of it. Dealing with the unknown. I think of a couple of specific times when we were trying to get some operations done in Korea and Thailand and some other places, and not all the ducks were in a row, so to speak. And it was kind of fun. I don't know, just dealing with the chaos and making things happen. And so I kind of missed that to some extent. That was a fun and interesting part about being in the military, being overseas and just figuring things out. Worst part, I think, like everybody, bureaucracy a bit, right? It can be a little overwhelming. It just felt like change kind of didn't happen, like it wasn't even possible. I think at times, which simplified things sometimes, right? It was like, okay, this is an obstacle we're going around. Um, but now I think being in a civilian career, and it's things that everybody knows should change, and it's widely agreed upon that it should change. That actually does, not immediately, but it actually does happen. And so that's definitely been relieving for sure.
Nice. Yeah, and obviously we were both kind of at the last duty station before we decided to get out. Curious to hear why you decided to get out and why specifically tech. If you could kind of tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like I had it all figured out, because that's not the case. But when I first went into the military, it was kind of deliberate. It was this kind of dumb quote from a guy that was spoke at my brother's high school graduation, and he said, "Live your life backwards." And I've kind of followed that and thought about, like, what kind of things do I want to do looking back on life. And so Marines and military in general was kind of first up on that list, and that was really important to me. And I kind of planned on doing four, and then getting out, but I actually really enjoyed that first role, especially being out with a battalion. Um, but then the other part of living life backwards and kind of looking back on life was, I wanted to try my hand at business, and really give that a shot and see if I can find success in business and be independent, and make things happen, so to speak. So that was always kind of on my bucket list, was to get into business, and that was a big driving factor for me getting out of the military, was to try that out.
Nice. As you were getting out, could you tell us what resources you used to transition into the tech sector?
Yeah, for sure. So three primary ones. I went through a nonprofit called Commit Foundation. Have either of you guys heard of Commit Foundation? So it's
No.
great. I think it's primarily focused for retirees. I was one of the younger individuals going through that program, but they do a good job of helping you. It sounds corny, but understand your why. Right? Like, really understand what it is you're optimizing for in your next role, the types of things that you enjoyed about the military, and the types of things that you did not, the types of roles and situations that you thrive in, and kind of what you're looking for in the next chapter of your life. And so they do a really good job at that. I think they do workshops on like a monthly basis with veterans, and they really help you understand some of that background. And then a key tenet of that is they have this concept called 1,000 cups of coffee. And I'll butcher their explanation of it, but the basic of it is just, if you have 1,000 cups of coffee, you're going to find what you're looking for. And what it means is just talk with 1,000 people, right? Go out there and meet and talk to as many people as you possibly can, and tell them your why, tell them what you're looking for and what you're optimizing for, and things will happen for you. And so I did that. And that really led me to Veterati, which is a great way to connect with other veterans. And I'm active on there today. And then it also led me to another foundation. So the third foundation kind of program I'll mention is Breakline. And Breakline is an organization that helps veterans specifically get into tech roles. And so Commit Foundation to help me understand the background, Veterati to have those conversations and help people help me, right? Tell them what types of things I'm looking for, and help give them an opportunity to refine what it is I'm looking for and tell me what I should be. And then Breakline, which is a for-profit organization that actually helps you get roles, and they're kind of like a placement type agency.
Very cool. I've definitely heard of Breakline. Was never a part of it. Was definitely a part of Veterati. Could you talk to us about some of the resources that you think were lacking? Sounds like these, are great resources, but did you notice anything that these three resources were unable to fulfill?
No, I mean, those three resources were really critical for me. I think the military's like out processing and program, that is lacking for sure. And I will say that the one thing I
Yeah.
got from it is that person told me Veterati, and I think Veterati is where I started having these conversations that led to Commit Foundation. So, I think those three organizations were a good mix for me, and weren't necessarily lacking anything. But as far as transition in general, yeah, there's a lot of missing resources there. I think the process of leaving it in general is, I think everyone agrees that needs to be changed. Back to what I was saying earlier, right? Everyone like knows this needs to change. It's just going to take a couple years for the military actually does it.
Definitely.
Gotcha. And kind of going back to, you said you use Breakline, and they help you get into tech roles. Can you kind of describe how you actually legitimately got your first job in tech, specifically?
Yeah, for sure. I'll preface with it was 2021. It was an absolutely great year for hiring in general. I don't think things are like this anymore. But I went through Breakline while simultaneously having lots of Veterati calls. And so Breakline basically learns about your background. They help you translate skills and help you adjust resume and help you kind of talk about your experience in a way that will translate well to hiring managers inside of tech companies. So they do a lot of like the initial training, but then the other thing they do is they actually open doors for you, and they'll uh, get you first interviews with tech companies, with their partners that they've partnered with. And so I think from Breakline, I had at least 3 or 4 job offers that came out of Breakline itself. And then I had another 1 or 2 that I got from just Veterati and really not Veterati necessarily, but just networking in general. So those two combined, and Breakline helped me with this, time all of those things, so that I really had like 5 total job offers to choose from, which was a really great spot to be in. And then all I had to do was rely on the work that I'd done in Commit Foundation of like, which one of these is going to be absolute best suited for what I'm optimizing for and the types of roles that I'm good at and I know I'll exceed in. And that really helped me kind of make the decision amongst those different job offers and land where I am today, which is on Tech.
Yeah. Can you kind of tell us decision process on, you have multiple roles. How did you actually go about picking one and dissecting the different roles and
Yeah.
landing on this one?
The roles I had could be generally grouped into 2 different ones. It was program management type roles. So I think there was one with AWS, one with Facebook, and another with a really early stage startup. Those were kind of program manager type roles. And then other ones were sales roles, which is where I ended up. But I think the decision between those two, and actually, I had a mentor call me when I was trying to make this decision. And I was leaning towards AWS. It's a program manager role. It paid well. I knew I'd do well in it because program management's kind of what we all do in the military, right? And she called me, and I forget the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, if you wanted to uh, develop and lead teams inside of a program, inside of a very large bureaucracy, and you said you loved the Marines, then why didn't you just stay in? And that's the way she worded it to me. I was like, all right, you kind of got me on that. You're right. I left to learn business and understand business. And I know that the best, at least at the time, I thought, the best way to learn business is through doing sales at a startup. And so that's what led me to my current role, which is a sales role inside of an earlier stage company. And true to form, I've learned just a ton about business, which was my goal and kind of what I was optimizing for.
Nice. And before we jump into what your current role is, can you tell us a little bit about what a program manager would be for kind of listeners that might want to be exploring that route?
Yeah, let me go through the Facebook program management role because it was interesting because I was wondering the same thing. I was like, there's a million programs inside the military and different teams to lead, like the martial arts center, right? And so I was expecting something like that. I just didn't know exactly what it looked like. But during that interview process, I really learned about it. And basically, this role was going to be, from what I understand, in charge of a team of other people who were going through business Facebook profiles and just checking to see if they were legitimate or not. So understanding if these were legitimate businesses that should have a page on Facebook, or if they violated some sort of policies and they should be removed. And so, that's everything military, right? It's managing teams, it's process, it's procedure, it's policy, it's making sure you're not missing things and attention to detail. And so that's what that role was going to look like. And the one at AWS was similar. It was program, or I think that was project manager of the Academy Student Outcome. So some very long title, and it was basically like figuring out, how successful people were after going through the AWS Academy certifications and figuring out the numbers behind that and understanding how successful that program was. And so it's that type of thing, right? It's a problem somewhere that needs to be solved that involves leading people and accomplishing objectives and kind of getting things done for the organization.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And now for your current role, you're an enterprise account executive. Before you kind of tell us what that is and kind of day to day of it, is that a role you can get as soon as you join the company, or is that something you have to work up to?
Yeah, so I think both. There's opportunity. So enterprise account executive is a really kind of strange title that just means salesperson. It just means like sales rep. Um, but yes, you can get that role like right out of military. Not here at this company, but there are enterprise account executive roles that you can get out of military. They might not be enterprise. They might be other type of account executives that are maybe selling to small and medium sized businesses, or maybe they are selling to enterprise, but it's very transactional sort of fast, low price sales situations. And so those roles are achievable. And if I remember correctly, I think a couple of our peers did start immediately into account executive roles. I actually did an intermediary role here first, which was sales development representative, which was much more of like calling and emailing and just trying to get conversations generated with the people and then turn it over to an individual who would then close the opportunity. And so that's the role I'm in now. But when I first started, it was much more of like working for a person like myself to get those leads and get those opportunities started.
Gotcha. So you kind of start in a role where you found potential leads and then you kind of pass them off to the role you're in now. And sales always kind of confused me when I was first trying to get out and I was hearing about sales roles. I understand the general idea is to sell someone something and all
Yeah.
that, but can you kind of walk us through a day in the life of what that actually means for someone working in that?
Yeah, I did not see myself in sales. It was that mentor of mine that I keep referencing. She really uh, told me, the best way to learn business, besides getting an MBA, which I did virtually before I got out. But it was like, go do sales at a start, and you're going to learn business very, very quickly. And so I do find that to be true, and it was great. But I never would have pictured myself in a sales role because there's a stigma, right? There's a thought of like the used car salesman type thing for salespeople out there, and the reality is at this level, which is higher price points, it's strategic, enterprise level situations that we're working towards. It's much less of that. It's much more of just it's business, right? It's understanding the unique value proposition that the company that you're working for offers. It's understanding the different business competition in the space. It's understanding someone else's business really well, right? So understanding, who this person is that's trying to solve a problem inside of their very large organization. And then it's just creating a mutual agreement between both parties, right? It's a mutual exchange of value. And further on that, the beauty of the SaaS model, the software as a service, it's a subscription model where basically it's important to not just get the initial sale, but make sure that's a great client and that they're happy, right, and continue to see value. And so you can't make bad deals in this business because maintaining that recurring revenue is just as important as signing that initial contract. And so as far as like understanding how businesses work and how they make money and how value is derived from products and services, sales is a really great opportunity to understand and learn more about that.
And when you say enterprise, just for people listening, you think of sales, you think of the car salesman, like you said, which is just one person to one person. But now this is enterprise being you're selling to a company, correct?
Yeah. So if someone says like B2B sales, and you're looking at sales roles, it's just business to business. So you're right, you're selling to a company versus B2C, which is business to consumer, versus B2G, which is business to government. But then there's another layer of question of, okay, you're selling to businesses, but what type of business, right? Is this a small or medium size business where it's much smaller transactional type uh, opportunities, or is this enterprise or strategic sales where you might only actually sign, 7, 8 agreements on a yearly basis, but they take maybe 6 to 9 months to actually get to that point. And so when you say selling, a lot of it is actually just at first getting that person to see the value and make sure that you're a good fit for them. But after that, it's actually really about helping that person sell internally. So we primarily here sell to Fortune 500, very large companies, right? 50, 60,000 employees plus. And they have a lot of bureaucracy, just like I dealt with and we all dealt with in the military. And they have a lot to deal with. And so a lot of it is helping them buy internally. So it's having conversations with them about creating a business case, creating a case for change, finding budget within their large organization, and then going to present that to executives inside of these large companies to say, yes, we need to invest in this software. So that's kind of what it looks like, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be one of my questions of why the 6 months. You think of the car salesman, you're like, all right, I'm in, I'm out for one day, maybe come back next week. But it sounds like you have a lot to do, maybe with the contract and all of that before,
For sure.
you can deliver it. And one question I just thought of was, how do you find these leads? You said before you were in the role of finding leads and then kind of passing them off. Like, how do you even find these leads?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the work that I did getting out of the military and the 1,000 cups of coffee and networking, that's really how you get leads in this business. So when you're talking enterprise, strategic level sales, it's less of ads and emails and clicking things and going through a sales funnel, and more of just knowing people and having conversations. And so the industry that I'm in is corporate security. And so there's actually a lot of, and it's not cybersecurity, it's more of like the physical aspect of corporate security. So it's actually a lot of former military, it's former law enforcement, former 3-letter agency. And these are the people that kind of run physical security programs inside of these large organizations. And so coming from a military background, it was really beneficial because it's easy to make a connection, and we have a mutual background where we understand each other a bit right from the start because of that mutual background. And so a lot of the way of generating leads is less of what you're thinking and more of networking and going to conferences and events and handing out business cards and shaking hands and asking people who they know and making connections. And that's kind of how leads are generated in an organization like this.
Very cool. I personally love sales. I've done it professionally for various startups. Very interested in your tool set. When you're reaching out to leads, are you using like a mail merge system? Are you using a CRM that you recommend when you've got these accounts? Is it stored in like a Excel spreadsheet, um, or is it more glorified like a Salesforce? Yeah, talk to us about some of the tool sets here.
Yeah, definitely Salesforce. That's like the majority of kind of where notes on leads and opportunities and deals and contracts, all of that is being housed in Salesforce, kind of our single source of truth for that. As far as like mail merge and email automation and things, it's like I said, it really doesn't work in this particular space. Now there are a lot of other sales roles where it's like, um, here's a template, send it out to 1,000 people. You'll have a 20% reply rate. Out of that 20% reply rate, you'll have a 13% rate of people. But like that is true of a lot of sales roles. But this level of sales role, it's really great for this because it's not that way. It's not about a numbers game. For me, it's like a simple notebook that just has like Mike Rodriguez, and a couple bullet points on what he likes and what industry he's in and what kind of problems he's having in his organization that I can help solve. And that's really the way. And then just continue to stay in contact, trying to provide value to that person until the timing's right, until this person has a decent understanding of what the company does. The timing's right from their internal, bureaucracy and budgeting timelines. And then it's usually a pretty quick, let's meet and discuss and see if there's anything here.
So when you're kind of nailing down your ICP, ideal customer profile, you mentioned you're networking at conferences and things like that. So for your role, does it require some travel? Can you work remote? Talk to us about the dynamics of that.
Yeah, for sure. Remote is definitely common in the company. We do have a headquarters here in Austin, Texas, and there's a good number of people that come into the office, but it's completely up to everybody if you want to work remote or come into the office. I think probably half of our company is remote, maybe even more. There is a good amount of travel here. I think, like I said, it's more of a strategic type sales role. So there's a lot more meetings of in person, right? Like, hey, let's meet you out in your headquarters in Palo Alto. And have a conversation, or I'll fly up to New York for a couple of days to meet with maybe one or two different individuals or teams that I'm talking to up there. So on average, it's probably once a month. And when I do travel, it's like 2-3 days, 4 days at the most. Nothing compared to military, right? So it's been nice to be home a lot more, even with traveling once a month.
Yeah. And so you talked about like why you chose a startup versus a large business, because you were interested in learning more about business. Are you thinking of starting a business yourself one day?
For sure. Yeah. I think Mike, when I was talking to you about getting out, I probably even said like, I'm going to go start my own tech company. And I think I got some mentorship quick of like, maybe get your feet wet, maybe learn a couple things about the industry first. And I think that was very sage advice that I've been following. So it is certainly where I'm headed. I'm trying to learn as much as I can and gain as much experience and also build a network, right, of people that would maybe want to join me in this. I don't have any necessarily ideas or anything yet, or really have started down the path, but it's definitely on my radar and definitely something that I'm aiming towards.
Same, Keith. Let's talk more.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and just to go back to the role, just because, I'm a software engineer. We've kind of talked about the path of, go to college, get a computer science, maybe go to coding boot camp, build some projects. What what skills do you need for your kind of role? And then two, how do you actually go about getting interviews and passing those interviews?
I think, in the course of that 1,000 cups of coffee, I asked a similar question, and then I followed, and then people would follow up with, well, what do you want to do? And I told people I want to eventually start my own business. I want to be a founder. And they kind of, gave me the advice of, if that's the case, then you should get into sales or these other types of roles. And then the follow up was, you don't need to do that certification. So I think it was always on my mind of like thinking of certifications and things I could do to get done. And I kept getting the advice of like, you probably don't need that as much as you think. I even had all the schooling needed for like the PMP, which I know is another common one for transitioning military. But again, I kept asking people, and they're like, honestly, in tech, like no one's going to look towards that. At least at the roles I was looking at. I won't speak for all of tech, but so as far as like hard skills that you need, I don't know. I think it's more of being able to solve problems, having high level conversations, having a strategic mindset. So a lot of it is really just how you come off in interviews, and then how well you can translate what you used to do and make sure that, Breakline did a great job of this, of me taking less of here are the cool things I did in the military and more of like here are the things that I did in the military that actually apply to the current role that I'm applying to. So really, I think that's a big part of it as far as like how to go about getting these roles, is just making sure that resume is translated. Making sure you're talking about how you worked with other cross department, individuals to solve complex problems. I mentioned and talked a lot about my work with foreign militaries, and a situation where we weren't necessarily, one person was outranking another, but we still needed to solve a problem, and they had resources that we wanted, and vice versa, and they had objectives and we had objectives, and they sometimes conflicted. And so I talked a lot about those relationships and those negotiations that I had with foreign military representatives, and I think those went really well in the interviews, and I highlighted those in my resume. And those that gave people confidence that I was going to perform well in a role like this. And then the other thing is just like grit, just making sure people knew that this is a quota carrying role where you have a number, right? You have a number you are responsible for. And unlike a lot of roles out there, like there's no way to like, kind of fudge the numbers or like make it look like you did something you didn't. I mean, this is like you either hit the number or you don't. And so this type of role is a lot about, making sure people trust that you can get things done, and that when you have an objective, you'll do what it takes to get that objective done. And so a lot of those things were really just, I made sure they came out in the resume and made sure they came out in the interviews. And that got me the couple of job offers that I had in sales roles.
So these aren't the PowerPoint slides where you can say how many trucks you have actually working versus not working. These are real numbers you have to put in.
That's right. That's
Notational.
And also kind of just going off what you said there, I know you mentioned there's, those numbers, the quotas you have to meet from, assuming amount of sales, maybe. How do you kind of describe the job? Is it long hours, short hours? Just depends on how many leads you have, how many sales you have. Does it vary a lot?
Yeah, it definitely ebbs and flows. I think whenever I find that an opportunity isn't demanding my time. And when I say that, think demonstrations of the product, technical conversation about how it's going to work. And again, I'm just really leading these things. I'm coordinating stakeholders on our side and coordinating stakeholders on their side and getting them together, and cell phone conversations to answer, ad hoc questions, contract negotiations and pricing conversations. Like those, a lot of how I spend my day, like calls and emails and cell phone chats and texting with the person that I'm working with on the other side. Because we're kind of a little partnership trying to get this done internally at their organization. And so that's a lot of what my day is. But to your question, it definitely ebbs and flows. I think during the slow times, what that's telling you is not that you can relax. It's telling you that you don't have enough opportunities that you're working, and that you need to go network more and find more opportunities. So really, whenever you are seemingly not busy, what that is innately telling you is go do some networking and find some more people to talk to.
Right on. Kind of asked this in the beginning, but now that we're talking about your tech side of things, what would you say are the best and worst parts of being in the tech industry, and particularly in sales?
I mean, I think the best and worst part's kind of the same. I love having a number. I love being accountable for it. And I love that aspect of it. It's meritocracy. It's what the Marines is, everything that it's supposed to be, right? And so I really love that aspect of it. But it's also an aspect that makes you worry. It keeps you up at night. Sometimes you're thinking about that number. You're thinking about certain opportunities that you have, and want to make sure that the call tomorrow goes right. And so I think it's definitely a situation where it's sort of a love hate with having a number on the board that everybody can see and everyone kind of knows your performance level for sure.
Nice. And I guess now that you've been in this role for a bit, would there be anything differently you do trying to get into this role, or maybe some advice for someone who's starting to think about it and still in the military?
Yeah. So when you're looking at sales positions, there's a couple of really important things to ask, and that is, what size company is it? Because that's going to drive a lot of how you feel inside the company, right? If it's a larger organization, it's going to feel more like the military. There's going to be bureaucracy. There's going to be a team you've never heard of that all of a sudden you need to get in contact with in order to get something done, right? Those types of things. Versus a startup where I'm very close to a lot of the leadership here in the company, and I feel like I was able to learn things very quickly, and I feel like I have a voice in the company because it's small. So I think that's the first thing, is figure out what size company. The next thing to kind of ask about is what you're selling and to who. And I've kind of alluded to this a couple of times now, but uh, what size contracts are the reps actually signing? What size companies will you be assigned to? How many opportunities are you closing on a yearly basis, right? And if it's a high number, 20, 30, 40, or even hundreds, then you're looking at more of a transactional sale where somebody's coming to you and saying, I'd like to buy this, and you're kind of processing paperwork. And that's not what I was looking for, right? I was looking for learning business and strategic sales. And so I think I feel like I got a little lucky. Like I didn't ask some of those questions, but those are some really important questions to ask: the size of company, what you're selling, and how much you're selling it to. And then the other part of the equation is talking to a rep there and just understanding how successful that company is, or how successful the reps are, right? So asking how many of those reps are hitting quota, what is the average quota attainment rate, and some things like that can help you make sure that when you land at a sales role, that it's a real one. It's not just we'll hire anybody that has a pulse, and if they sell stuff, we'll keep them, and if they don't, 6 months later they'll be fired, because there's lots of those out there. And so I think trying to snuff those out can be difficult. But if you ask those questions, and especially if you just make a connection with somebody already in the role, that can help you kind of find those other opportunities.
Very cool. Could you tell us some of your favorite potentially books or content creators out there that are experts in sales, maybe even business? Do you have any recommendations for listeners that are endeavoring towards this role?
Sales, there's a guy, Brandon Fluharty, who specializes in strategic enterprise sales. And I think a lot of the way he views sales is a lot of the way that I do, and that this is a business relationship, and that it's about building mutual value between parties. So I think he does a great job of echoing what new sales looks like, and knowing what strategic sales looks like. So he's great for this role in particular, as far as somebody to follow to get an understanding of what this looks like.
Awesome. And then, when I was especially being an infantryman, you're not really exposed to a lot of different civilian careers. And it led me to a series of career changes. So my question to you is, in your opinion, what can we do to kind of expose more of this like sales and just the tech industry in general to active duty service members, transitioning service members, that can really kind of showcase tech could potentially be a good place for you?
Well, you guys are doing it right. I think this podcast is great, and I think more conversations, right? More uh, people talking to other people about what it is that they do, and being okay with that, and reaching out and asking for help. As mentioned a couple of times, big fan of Veterati, because it's just, you put your name on there and you say this person would be interesting to talk to, and you set up a time with them. And so just more talking, more conversation, and more understanding of the different opportunities out there. I feel like right now it's a lot of talking, but before you get out, right? So it's like it's talking to the wrong people, because it's people that haven't done it before, right? So they're like, oh yeah, here's like this course that can help you go do such and such job. And meanwhile, it's like, no, that person doesn't know. Like, you need to talk to somebody that did it a year ago or 2 years ago, or even some people that did it 5 years ago, but they're in a spot where you know that you would love to be, and those people have the good advice. So more conversation, more talking about it, more education across the board, and I think that's really gonna make a difference.
Awesome. Yeah, that's kind of the reason we're doing this, is because yeah, we didn't really have too many people to talk to when we were trying to do this that were veterans. So um, definitely trying to help with that. And one thing that's kind of taken over tech news slash the world is AI, right? Obviously, no one knows, is this going to be Terminator style in the future? Is this going to be just a tool that we use? One, do you use AI at all in your current role? Two, do you see any future with AI in your role, and how it may have changed it or affect it?
Yeah, I definitely use AI. I use Anthropic's Claude model, and it's mostly for wording things, right? So it's uh, words can be very important in this job. You could have the same thought to get across, but one way you get it across and the person doesn't want to talk to you again, and the other way you say basically the same concept but in a different way, and the person says let's move forward, right? So wording is very important, and so I do a lot of that when prepping for calls or when sending out an email. I'll use it to help me describe things like, hey, I need this person to reconsider the higher contract option that we have in front of them, without, because I think it's a good fit for them, and because I think it'll help them reach their personal goals. But I don't want it to sound like I'm just trying to make more money off this, right? So like comments like that, right? And you put that uh, into the Claude model, and it can help you kind of get that wording just right. So I used it a lot for that, and I think it's very helpful for that type of work in sales in general. Not to come back to this like a fifth time, but I think for like transactional level sales, it'll be very soon, very quick, because a lot of the sales, as far as like AI taking over, because I think a lot of the sales roles are, it's transactional, right? It's, hey, I'm interested in this product. I have these three questions, and then it's a salesperson going to get and retrieve information and then present it to that person, so that person can make an informed decision about which option to choose. And so I think that sort of transactional level sale, a lot of salespeople that are in that position, I think AI will very quickly take over those types of roles. I think even in my role, more strategic sales, it will happen eventually. Um, I will say that startups, I think, will be the sort of safe zone for a while, because I think startups require a lot of innovative thought and a lot of creative problem solving, and a lot of um, sort of flexible analytic, work, creative work, that I think AI will probably take a while to get there. Now, how long is a while? I don't know. It could be like only 5 more years or something. But I do think transactional sales will be very quickly taken over by AI for sure.
That makes sense. And Keith, again, we just want to thank you for being on here. I think I learned a lot about what sales actually is and kind of day in the life. So really appreciate you having you on here and enlightening our listeners. Again, we'll post Keith's LinkedIn in the description. We'll also post his Veterati information in the description because he mentors people there. And yeah, just want to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, Jamil, I really appreciate this. Thank you both for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a deep pleasure speaking with another Marine, especially that's served in the infantry. It's and now that's in tech. So small little circle that we've got going on, but
Right.
just to sit down this Friday afternoon, it's really awesome. But yeah, we'll link any resources Michael mentioned that that Keith had talked about. We'll post those in the episode description. And if you want to contact us, we've got we'll put our social media in the description as well. So feel free to reach out or give us suggestions. And thanks again for joining us, Keith. It's been awesome.
For sure.
Yep.